school was really helpful. I think having like the structure of classes was really helpful for me. But as great as Johnson County is, it is a community college, and I was, taking night classes and working. So it was a lot of, kind of going out and learning things on my own, and really taking the projects I was given and really like blowing them up and expanding them, so that I had a decent portfolio when I was trying to enter the workforce. And then, yeah, my colleagues at DMH, especially my old CD, Rob Mitchell, really taught me a lot about form. I, can't tell you how often I'd be sitting there with one of my ACDs or CDs over my shoulder, just like, nope, move that 2 pixels to the right, and then it's perfect, And it just always, anytime that happens, your work gets 1,000% better.
That's cool. How does it compare? How does learning design and, getting to a point where you know, your output matches your taste level? How does that compare to music and design? Like, do you think they're similar, or do you think they're kind of different muscles?
That's interesting. I think very similar. Yeah. I think in both cases, my taste far out exceeds my skill, but I think that's great. I think constantly being exposed to, whether it's music or design, creativity that inspires you. I think that just makes me keep pushing myself to learn more and be better.
So, all right, I have a theory. I want to hear if you agree with it or disagree with it. It's okay to disagree with it, but do you think that the best designers uh, were sort of born with something? They just the way they see things, or maybe they were just naturally gifted at drawing or something like that. Is it that, or do they just develop like a really strong taste and they want to be able to create something that gets at that? Like they just have great taste and they want to be able to, and eventually, they create a bunch of crap and then eventually they get better and it gets closer to that level. Like, is it one or the other? Is it both? Is it like, do you have any ideas on that?
Yeah, I've actually thought about that question a lot because I think I personally always struggle with not being like immediately really good at things, um, particularly creative things and things that I'm sort of aesthetically drawn to, like music or design. I think I've always had to, like, design was a really humbling experience, and like learning design and like really treating it as a discipline really taught me to be like more patient with myself. And so to answer your question, I do think it's both. I think people are drawn to certain things that they enjoy doing or enjoy, participating in. I think that's where like the sort of natural talent comes in, but I don't think that there is quote unquote natural talent. I think people are drawn to things, and if you're drawn to something and enjoy doing it all the time, then you'll eventually get good at it because you enjoy doing it all the time. I don't think that people are just, born playing guitar like Jimi Hendrix. I think he, sat in front of his TV and played guitar constantly when he was a little kid because that's what was fun to him. And then he got amazing at it. And, so I think it's kind of both, uh, but mostly I think it's hard work.
Yeah, I've wondered that off and on because both of my parents were artistic. Um, my sister's not, but I am. I could draw since little kid. I have two kids. One of them is fantastic at drawing. The other one doesn't care about it at all. So you wonder how much is it like, are they born with it, or is it us just like encouraging it and positive reinforcement and that type of thing?
Right. And
I
like
don't.
seeing you do it, and they're like, oh, that's what dad does. So it's cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I don't know. I don't know if there. I do think there's something in the brain that just understands like sort of space and form, and
Mm.
it clicks better. And then if you get people who can encourage it and positive reinforcement, I think it can develop faster. And also, I think the key thing is that I've really thought about this a lot with my daughter, who's now 14. But when she was little, I was really concerned that someone would look at her stuff and be like, "That's not good," and then we go away from it from that. I think a lot of us are born with this potential, and then it's critiqued either by ourselves or someone else, and we just stop. And I think the
100%.
I think the
Yeah.
creative people that we work with are the people who didn't stop when everybody else said, "Oh, this is bad." You know what I mean? Like my taste exceeds my ability, and I don't like that. It's not a good feeling. And then we're the ones who are just like, I don't care. I'm gonna keep going.
Yep, I'm gonna design stuff whether you like it or not.
Right. Well, it's kind of like with music, right? Like when you begin with music, I mean, it probably people don't want to listen to it. So you just have to like push through that, I suppose, right?
I think people still don't really want to listen to it. uh, but yeah, we do it because we love it, you know. And I think that's the question too, like uh, you know, that you learn as you grow as a creative person is, you know, learning to take parts of feedback that are useful to you. And not, I don't think I wouldn't say that I ignore feedback ever, but I think knowing how to utilize feedback in a way that is productive, I think takes some time to learn.
Well, that's what I was going to ask next is doing design in a commercial environment, right? You've got clients who are paying for things, they've got business goals that they're trying to hit, and design is not the end goal, but it's a thing that can lead to that, right? What is like what are some of the things that you love to hear from a client, or like what makes for a good client or makes for good inputs, or maybe even just like a good creative director? What's the most helpful, you think?
Sure. I think, you know, my favorite clients that I've worked with were the ones that came into the process, to the design process, particularly with like identity work, that come in with their own perspective and their own ideas and their own, you know, particularly their own take on how they want to present themselves. I think the clients that have really thought that through, and can bring that to a discussion that isn't just, you know, like mandatories on top of mandatories, that but it's a real back and forth creative discussion. I think the short answer is my favorite clients are the ones who are great collaborators.
What do you think that is? I mean, I think every client probably sets out to be a great collaborator, but we know that that's not always the case. What do you think? What makes the ones who are great at collaboration, like, what do you think makes them good at it?
You know, I think it's the same on our end. Not being too rigid in your perspective, or, you know, what you think is right, particularly on our end, you know, taking the time to really listen to our clients and figure out what their needs are and help them sometimes arrive at figuring out what those needs are. And then on their end, I think being open to listening to creative solutions that they might not have come to by themselves. I mean, that's why they're looking to us, people who are, you know, who've been to school for you know, to learn aesthetics and to learn design, you know, to kind of know when to turn us loose and let us do our thing.
Yeah. Have you had people approach you and ask you for advice on how to kind of break through with design and those types of things? And if so, like what's some of the tips that you've given them?
Yeah, I really like working with students. I try to go back and do, you know, portfolio reviews at Johnson County and the Art Institute and KU. And so working with student design students is always a ton of fun for me. It's really neat to see like what they're creating and like the new perspectives that they're bringing to the industry. And then it's also fun to, yeah, like have a little bit of like industry experience and often kind of a little bit better form just by virtue of, you know, time. So it's really nice to be able to like provide that to young students. And I would say pretty frequently they just straight up ask, how do I get a job? How do I
Yeah.
get a job? Yeah, and I always tell them, you know, it kind of what we were just talking about, like with client interactions, you know, be strong in your perspective, defend your work, but listen when people have advice or feedback for you. I think those are the trickier interactions that I've had with students, are when you know, you're young and really inspired and passionate, and sometimes that can make you a little wary of taking advice or feedback or admitting when you don't know things. And I think that that comes with experience too, is just like realizing that, like we talked about initially, like at the start of the conversation, you know, figuring out that the more advice and the more perspectives you can get on your work, the better. Even if you don't make adjustments or change your perspective based on that feedback, I think having that input at your disposal is just really invaluable.
Yeah. That's similar to kind of some of the things I say. I always say, like, this is more competitive than you probably realize. I mean, you're sitting in a class full of people who want to work in this industry, and there's probably not jobs for all of you right now. So it's not just going to come to you. But if you really want this and you can get more at bats and you can do more work, you can explain it more to other people, and you just don't give up whenever the doors don't open for you, like nobody can stop you. Um, but you gotta keep doing it. And I'm sorry, but like the projects that you're doing in class aren't enough. Like you need to keep doing it on your own, and people will see that, like the self initiative and those types of things. You'll just have a more robust portfolio. And by the way, you're getting better every time you do that. So, um, but not everybody takes that advice, you know. So
Sure. It
that's
is
where they kind
tricky
of
too, like often when I do portfolio reviews, that's a tricky time to come in with critique because oftentimes, they're in their final semester and they're, getting ready to shop their book around to professionals and it's, in their mind it's done. So having feedback on that can be, I think, sort of emotionally taxing, which I
completely.
understand.
Oh
But
yeah.
it's also, I think it's good practice in a pretty low stakes setting to have industry professionals come and look at your book before you're actually interviewing.
Well, and
Um,
you learn it's a job. I mean, you part of your job is to take feedback and do something with it. It's no longer your passion projects purely, right? Like you have to find time for those and find moments for those. So yeah, it is a stressful time for all of us, I think, as we were going through that. Whenever people talk to either students or other industry friends, like how do you talk about native? Like what's the experience been, or how does it stand out compared to other shops that you've experienced?
Sure. I mean, I've only experienced one other shop so far, but I really, I think this is probably pretty common feedback for you, but I really think that the people at Native and the culture here really make a huge difference. I think it strikes a really awesome balance between, there's definitely that camaraderie. We all hang out, like everybody gets along really well, but everyone also is very professional and like we know when to, put the drinks down and get back to business.
Yeah, you gotta you gotta have both, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it is interesting when people talk about the people. A lot of companies say that, and I think as an outsider, it sounds like kind of like a throwaway statement. Like, oh yeah, of course everybody says that. I don't know how else to explain it. I mean, it is the people, right? Like every job is like that. To me, it's 90% of it. So the quality of the people, the way they interact with each other, like that's 90% of it.
Yeah, and I think we're also really lucky. Like we have a pretty diverse team and everybody brings like a really unique perspective to it. And I think at Native, there's a really open environment for that. Like everyone's really encouraged to be unique and bring those perspectives to the table. It's not just like, yeah, we have a really diverse team that we don't really listen to ever, and we keep our processes rigid and it's a really open and creative environment and it's also been interesting for me like working with strategy and performance teams. My last shop was really small and we were very nobody was siloed off and we didn't have a performance or strategy team, so we were kind of all responsible for sort of doing that research. So it's really invaluable resource, I think, to have a whole team of people doing that on every project, every client that we work with.
Yeah, my thought is there's so many potential blind spots with the work that we do that you really have to be thoughtful about making sure that you can reduce those blind spots by inviting people in and listening and making sure everybody's got a voice, whether it's different background, different discipline, different whatever, and just like different personality, like making sure that loud people and quiet people all share equally, you know? And that's how you get rid of those blind spots. Otherwise, I think there's a huge risk, even on behalf of our clients, right? Like you could just be singular that it's you put work out there that's like tone deaf or just misses the mark completely. And I think we've all worked in environments where it was lopsided, like it was too heavy weighted in one area. So yeah, I hope there's an openness and like a trust where people just we don't have to follow every idea, but we want to hear them all, right?
Yeah, definitely. I've definitely noticed that in the projects I've worked on so far. Everybody has something to throw at the wall.
Yeah, that's what just makes it fun too. I think like just the possibilities and hearing from everybody, appreciating everybody's different angles. I think that's what makes it fun, you know? Like that's to me like the potential part of the project is like the most fun. And then you get to execute it, and you get to see it in the wild and everything. But it's like the potential of it is it's just like an addictive feeling, I think.
I don't know. I do really like the execution of things, especially especially when we can talk our clients into letting us really go nuts on the executions.
Well, would you say that you're more of a details oriented like execution person, or are you more the blue sky, like explore the possibilities, not as concerned with execution person?
I think it really depends on the project. Like I think with design, specifically, if I'm working on a logo, for instance, like I'm gonna get as blue sky as I can initially, and then I'm going to work into, those final executions. The form is going to be as perfect as I can make it. And that is an extremely detail oriented process. But again, at the onset of a project like that, or any project, like you have to kind of live in that blue sky for a minute. So I think for me, that's generally the process is like start really big and narrow in really small.